The most profitable food item on earth is not the burger. It is not the pizza. It is not the fried chicken or the breakfast sandwich. It is the thin strip of fried potato sitting silently beside them on the plate. The French fry. The side dish that built empires, funded wars, and engineered modern addiction. Before you take your next bite, you should know this: that crispy golden stick carries a history of poison, theft, political propaganda, and a chemical secret so dangerous that governments tried to hide it from you. This is not the story of a garnish. This is the story of how a toxic mountain tuber conquered the world, how a small nation had its invention stolen by its neighbor, how a fast food empire reverse-engineered the human brain, and how a single chemical reaction inside a fryer may be costing you far more than the menu ever admitted. The history of the French fry is the history of everything we refuse to see about what we eat. What you are about to learn will follow you into every restaurant you ever enter. Prepare to see the side dish differently. Before the fry, there was the potato. And the potato was a weapon. High in the Andes Mountains, where the air is thin and the soil is volcanic, the Inca cultivated a tuber so toxic that its wild ancestors could kill a man where he stood. The leaves were poison. The sprouts were poison. The green flesh beneath the skin was poison. Only through generations of careful breeding, soaking in bitter water, and drying in the freezing mountain air did the Inca transform this natural weapon into a source of life. The Spanish conquistadors did not seek it. They stumbled upon it while searching for gold and silver. But what they found in the dirt was more valuable than any metal they could melt. The potato traveled back to Europe in the dark holds of ships, carried alongside the plunder of empire. For centuries, Europeans refused to touch it. They called it cursed food. They claimed it caused leprosy and madness. They fed it only to prisoners and animals. They were wrong. The potato was not a curse. It was survival itself. And once it finally took root in the cold soil of northern Europe, nothing could stop what came next. But the potato was only the beginning. The fry was still centuries away. The French fry was not born in France. That is the first lie, and it has been repeated so often that the world has forgotten the truth entirely. The truth begins in the foggy river towns of Belgium, where fishermen along the Meuse fried thin slices of potato when the winter came, the river froze solid, and the fish disappeared beneath the ice. Street vendors pushed carts through narrow cobblestone alleys, selling hot, crispy potatoes to factory workers in the early industrial age. The Belgians had created something perfect. The French did not invent the fry. They tasted it across the border. They borrowed it. And then they served it in Parisian restaurants as their own culinary invention. When American soldiers arrived in Europe during the First World War, they encountered Belgian vendors speaking French. The soldiers made a mistake that would last a century. They called the food French. The Belgians had built it from nothing. The French had borrowed it. And America would soon industrialize it beyond recognition. But the name was only the beginning of a theft that would stretch across oceans, centuries, and billions of plates. The fry crossed the Atlantic long before the wars, carried by a man who documented everything he ate with obsessive precision. Thomas Jefferson, serving as a diplomat in Paris, encountered the dish in the capital's finest kitchens. He did not call it a fry. He described it with exacting precision in his records as potatoes served in the French manner. He brought the recipe back to Monticello, serving it to guests who had never seen a potato sliced so thin, cooked so crisp, salted so perfectly. In the early American Republic, the fry was a luxury reserved for the elite. It was served at state dinners. It was discussed in letters between presidents. It was a curiosity. But it would not remain a delicacy for the wealthy. The industrial age was coming. The potato was about to become a crop of the masses. And the fry was about to transform from a diplomatic delicacy into a weapon of mass consumption that would soon feed armies, then nations, then the entire world. Jefferson had no idea that he was planting the seed of a global empire. The recipe would outlive every empire he ever served. Food has always been political. But no food in modern history has been used as propaganda more brutally than the fry. In 1917, American soldiers returned from the Belgian front with stories of crispy potatoes sold by street vendors in war-torn towns. The name French fry entered the American vocabulary through confusion and war. But the name would become a battlefield again, decades later. In 2003, when France opposed the invasion of Iraq, American politicians did not boycott wine. They did not boycott cheese. They declared war on a potato. Congressional cafeterias across the federal government scrubbed the word French from their menus. They renamed them freedom fries. It was a tantrum disguised as patriotism, a petty gesture performed by elected officials in the halls of power, broadcast across global news networks. History rarely notices when a food becomes a weapon of state. The Belgians watched in silence. The French mocked it. And the fry, indifferent to human politics, continued to sell in billions. But beneath the comedy, a darker empire was building that would soon control the global potato supply and rewrite the chemistry of the food itself. Ray Kroc did not invent the fry. He perfected its exploitation. When Kroc took control of McDonald's, he faced a critical problem. The brothers had built a system for burgers. Kroc needed a side dish that cost almost nothing to produce and returned infinite profit. The answer was the French fry. He built a vertical empire. He controlled the potato farms. He controlled the processing plants. He engineered the exact length, width, and sugar content of every potato. He designed a cooking process that combined salt, fat, and heat into a neurological trigger. The fry was not food anymore. It was a delivery system for addiction. The crunch, the salt, the melt on the tongue, these were not accidents. They were calculations made in boardrooms by scientists in white coats. The sugar content of the potato was bred higher to ensure a deeper golden color. The salt was measured to hit the bliss point. The fat was selected to coat the mouth and trigger craving. And the calculation was simple: the more you ate, the more you craved. The more you craved, the more you bought. The potato had become a product, and the human brain had become the target. In 2002, Swedish scientists discovered something that the food industry had kept quiet for decades. When potatoes are fried at high temperatures, they create a chemical called acrylamide. The same substance is used in industrial plastics, grouts, and cigarette smoke. It is classified as a probable human carcinogen. The industry panicked. Lobbyists moved through Washington and Brussels with briefcases full of delay. Governments buried the studies and deferred regulation. Meanwhile, the trans fat era was already destroying arteries across the developed world. Partially hydrogenated oils, the secret behind the perfect fast food fry, were banned only after decades of corporate cover-ups and public health disaster. But the greatest scandal was not the chemical. It was the economics. A single potato costs a farmer mere cents. A serving of fries at a major chain is marked up by over 4,000%. The farmer who grew it receives almost nothing. The corporation that froze it, fried it, and salted it receives everything. And the consumer receives a stick of poison wrapped in nostalgia, sold back to them at a price that would bankrupt the very farmer who grew it. The French fry is not a side dish. It is a story of empire, of stolen credit, of engineered addiction, and of a chemical secret hidden in plain sight. Every time you order it, you are tasting 5 centuries of conquest, political tantrums, and corporate calculation. The next time you see that golden pile, remember what it cost. Not the price on the menu. The real price. Paid in colonial ships, in congressional tantrums, in farmer bankruptcies, and in the silent accumulation of a chemical that was never meant to enter your blood. If this story changed how you see the simplest food on the menu, then the truth is doing its job. The history of what we eat is never as innocent as it tastes. Stay curious. Subscribe, and stay hungry for the truth. The truth is always on the menu. The next story is already waiting, and it is darker than you imagine.